First, let's get an update on USA Facts. Where are you with it today? How have you updated it? New features, new data, what?
Well, we launched our platform with data from the government about the government. No fake news, no alternate facts. We launched on tax day. We keep adding more data and we keep the information current. But the real thing we're doing now at usafacts.org, in case somebody wants to check, is we're trying to help citizens really run through topics of the day. So we have a walkthrough up there right now that'll walk you through the president's budget in the context of what has happened historically. What does GDP look like? What has tax revenue looked like? What's the deficit look like? And how does all of that compare to the CBO? We make no predictions. We're going to make sure people can walk through and look at these government proposals in the context of the past. That's all that's factual, and then be able to say, does this make sense to me or not? We have a little video that goes along with it that'll explain to citizens, this is kind of the set of data and the way to think about, by the numbers, how do you think about something like the budget proposal?
You say it's just the facts, and I know you now know these facts better than almost anyone. As our lawmakers, as the president, as they talk about tax reform and health care, do you have any advice?
Yeah, in a way I do. These things are holistic issues. It's sort of funny to me. We look at tax reform, we look at the budget, and we look at health care. And yet when you really look at the economics of these three things, they're linked just like this. I mean, what does it mean to have a budget without tax reform? And it's our process. I'm not condemning anybody, but it's kind of nutty. You have to have a tax plan in order to have a budget. Be like a company having an expense plan without a revenue plan. It just doesn't make sense. And then one of the biggest pieces of expenses, that's healthcare. And you don't have a healthcare. I mean, how do these things, so really understanding how these things mesh together would be a key piece of advice I would certainly give decision makers, legislators, and the executive branch.
You mentioned this is an age of misinformation, of fake news. How big a problem is that? And what's the responsibility of these platforms, Facebook, Google, Twitter?
I think this notion of people being able to sort of be fed whatever's going to make them feel good, because that's what people are really doing. People want to feed whatever the instincts are. And I think that the goal has to be to say, this is how it looks. You can see it any way you want to. But someplace you have to come and be able to take a look at stuff objectively. I'm not sure you could say that's Facebook's job. They're not in the news business. They pass along other people's news. Same thing with Google. That's part of the issue here, is things can look authentic. We did a USA Facts poll, and when surveyed, people will say, I find my information most often on social media, and I trust it the least.
So do you think Facebook and Google and Twitter should be policing this more, or that's not their job?
They can't. It's not in the nature of what's going on. I do think over time there needs to be something that's the equivalent of a authenticated user on Twitter, where you get the little bullet that says you really are who you say you are. I think it'd be nice to have authenticated sources, so that people can say, I really want to see not just what the crowd is saying, but I want to hear from some authentic sources.
What if that information isn't coming from the crowd, if it's coming from our own president? Is it a problem if he's the one spreading misinformation?
Well, we elected the president, our country as a whole. He is our president in chief. And I know there's people who have problems with that and people who are supportive of that. But at least when the president speaks, he's speaking authentically for himself. And in a sense, that is a set of facts. When a major policy leader speaks, you could say it's true, it's not, you like what he says, you don't like what he says, but it's what he's thinking. And every voter probably benefits by having the ability to hear directly, just as we hear directly from other people. I get a chance to speak directly on the internet. LeBron James gets a chance to speak directly on the internet. Not everybody wants to hear what people say to one another. They don't always agree. Certainly we've seen that with LeBron and the president.
There are some who say the president is taking it to another level, perhaps even inciting nuclear war on Twitter. Should he be kicked off Twitter? Should he be allowed to make these statements on Twitter?
Everybody has the right to speak for themselves. And that includes the President of the United States. Everybody has the right to speak for themselves. That's kind of in the fundamental nature of this country, and I think it's an important one. I think the citizens have an obligation to elect the people who they think will best represent their interests. And that gets a chance to get battle tested every 2 years, every 4 years. And I love our system because people have to constantly prove themselves. And if people are doing things that are not valued, that'll come across. And if people are doing things that are valued. Now, the way our system works, it doesn't take 100% to win. It takes logically 51%, of course, with the Electoral College. That's not really what it is. But it takes logically 51% to win. And people have a right to hear directly as they go cast their ballots.
You ran Microsoft for many years. You dealt with issues like immigration. Do you have any concerns about the stance the president is taking on things like DACA, for example?
I think immigration is a super important thing. My dad was an immigrant. My grandparents on the other side were immigrants. I value the fact that immigrants come into this country. I think it is hugely, hugely important. It's not something that was just important 100 years ago. It remains important. It remains important in terms of high-tech workers coming into the country. It remains important in terms of people moving back and forth across our southern border. And there are complicated issues. There are issues of national security, but there are also issues of economy and fundamental humanity. And I do think it's important to look at all of those things, including humanity, as we kind of address the plight of the so-called DACA issues.
You were a big investor in Twitter. Do you still have your entire stake, or have you sold it?
I continue to have a decent-sized stake in Twitter. Yes.
So what's your take on how they're running the company now and how they're dealing with these issues?
Yeah, I think they're driving forward. Like anything that I've been involved with, more, better, faster is always good. Would love to see more, better, faster, but I think...
More better of what?
More better product, more better earnings, more better revenue, more better improvements in cost structure, you name it. And that's not a specific criticism. It's just a general view that things need to move even faster. But, they're doing things the right way. They're kind of headed the right direction. And I'm in as an investor. These other issues are interesting. But I think so far, actually, they're very difficult, they're very controversial, and they need to be dealt with in conjunction with legislators and other people who are shining a light kind of on the social media issues.
What about some of the hate and online abuse stuff? Should Twitter be taking a harder line?
Well, I do think there's stuff that is wholly inappropriate. Now, I believe in free speech, but there is a point at which that becomes unreasonable. And I do believe, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or any other form of expression, there is a line that once crossed, you need to make sure that you are appropriately moving that stuff out of the public sphere.
Jack still has his 2 jobs. No sign of a change there. How do you feel about that?
I still think it would be good if Jack had 1 job. And it could be either Square or Twitter, but I still think that's I've run a company, and I understand how defocusing it can be to try to do 2 things. One thing is hard enough, so I still believe in that, and I express that freely, if you will.
Would you prefer if it was Twitter?
Sure. I think Jack's an impressive guy. I'd love to have him full-time running Twitter.
So let's talk about we'll get to Microsoft. Let's talk about the Clippers. You lost Chris Paul.
We did.
That's a big loss after 7 seasons. How do you feel about that? How's the team recovering?
We're back, man. We're back. It is. I just got back. I was in Hawaii for our training camp, which was just as exciting a thing as could be for me. We had 2 preseason games. We're going to be really, really, I think, pretty good, darn good. We're going to surprise people. We only have a small nucleus, 4 people returning full-time from last year, 5 people returning full-time from last year. So most of our folks are new, but I think we're going to be really great. We picked up this guy, never played in the NBA before, 30 years old, Milos Teodosic. I mean, the guy is an incredible passer. It's been cool to see kind of him come alive, and I think people are going to just go, ooh, ah, in the way they expect from our team in terms of great passes to thundering finishers like Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan.
I think
we're going to be great.
Any hard feelings with Chris?
No, I mean, I respect Chris's right to do what he wants to do. He made a choice. He and I talked it over. Wasn't my choice. Would have loved him to stay, but I wish him well. We've had a nice dinner since then. I told him I want all the best for him in life, just not when he plays us.
Well, on that note, what's your feeling that he may be going to Houston Rockets to create this super team? I mean, what do you think about super teams in general? Should that be allowed?
I think in all things, that there needs to be some kind of a balance. Why are there super teams? It's partly because they're owners who want to put them together, like us. We all want to put together the right team. But it's also because players want to play with the group of people they want to play with, and they too are figuring this stuff out. What I think the game needs is enough competition to stay exciting. That is important. That is something we talk about at our league meetings. That is something the commissioner is very focused in on. And I actually think there's a lot more competition in the NBA than people think. There's at the beginning of every year, there's 6-7 teams that probably have a realistic shot, which I think is pretty good. I know everybody's got kind of warrior going on right now, but we don't. They're a good team. But Cleveland's a good team. We're a good team. Boston's a good team. The Rockets are a good team. The Thunder, the T-Wolves. There are a lot of good teams out there.
Huge controversy between the president and the NFL. The NBA has told its players, you have to stand during the national anthem. Do you agree with that? Or do you think players should be able to express themselves on the court?
We have a set of rules in the NBA. They're laid out. They're clear, which I think is appropriate. The players can do what they want to do. I mean, these two things are kind of not in contention, but the commissioner has made it clear that we have rules, and he has to enforce the rules, and he will enforce the rules if players do not respect the rule that says you stand during the national anthem. I think, to the degree our players have ways they want to express themselves, they can use any of the tools at their disposal. Some of those tools might be in violation of NBA rules. Some of those tools are not in any violation of NBA rules. It's up to the players, and they know kind of where things stand and the consequences. I certainly support our players exercising their free speech in the ways that seem authentic to them.
So if they want to kneel, they can kneel?
They can. They know their consequences, but they certainly can.
What are the consequences?
The commissioner will let that be known should such an action happen, and he's made that clear.
So what have you said to the team? Have you guys talked about this?
All I've said, and I've said really to Doc, is we would support our players if they want to have a message that they want to put out, and there's any way for the team to support them in expressing themselves in ways that are appropriate. We're happy to support our players in that.
Do you think this is something Trump should have got involved in the first place? A fight he should have picked?
I don't know. I can't tell the president what's the fight to get involved with or not. I can tell you, I respect our athletes. I respect the way our athletes are out there expressing themselves. Whether you agree or disagree is not the point. It's just not the point. There are issues on their minds that they want to push to the fore. Now I actually hope the dialogue behind these things gets at the issues, and that we move to that next phase, whether it's what the players have expressed or what the president has expressed. There's something back there. They were good to express it. Now let's hope we can to actually move to the issues behind them, whether it's race or police or respect for the military and the police. Those are important issues that we need to get to.
Satya Nadella wrote in his book that you told him to be himself as he took on this challenge of taking over from you in the shadow of Bill. How do you measure Satya's leadership so far?
Well, I'm not an insider in any way. So my lens is the same lens that any other.
That might be an under-exaggeration, but understatement.
No, it actually, of course, I watch more carefully. But I don't know anything that anybody else doesn't know. What I would say is Satya's really continued the ramp on the cloud nicely, and I give him a lot of kudos for that. And I knew when I left it would require a whole different kind of operating methodology, culture. Sounds like he's got there or is getting there, and I salute him on that. Certainly investors are believing in that strategy, and What's not to like about that as a Microsoft shareholder,
Are
if
you
you
still Microsoft's largest shareholder?
Yes. And well, there may be an actively managed mutual fund who owns more than I do, but that would be about it. So I do think that he's taken the company kind of along a good path, and, you know, I'm just sitting there saying, you go, boy, you go.
Was it hard to watch him take over and say a lot of stuff is broken and it needs to be fixed?
I think his book was actually pretty good about that. He recognizes the good. He recognizes the things that needed to be changed. I think he's navigated that very, very well. And from my perspective, you know, we knew we needed to get into the cloud. I got that started. He's really taken it to another level, and I respect the fact that he's had to do things differently. I knew things would have to be done differently in that area. That's part of the reason it was a good time for a change, if you will. Hardware is a whole different deal. He's pushed that along with Xbox and Surface, and, you know, I kind of respect that needed things done differently. And over time, things need to be shaken up and freshened. And, you know, like I had been at Microsoft the whole time. It reflected my personality and Bill's personality. But kind of like children, things need to keep growing, if you will. And we revel when our children are grown up and are, you know, sort of making their own way. And I revel that Satya's taking Microsoft to its next level, sort of going forth in new and in different ways.
So Azure is still moving along, but Amazon Web Services still much bigger and growing faster. I mean, do you want more, better, faster from Satya in the cloud?
Sure, I do. Absolutely. And as an investor on our quarterly call, I say, come on, let's keep it moving. Let's keep it moving. Let's keep it moving.
Are you listening into all the calls?
No, I don't listen. And I, you know, like any other large investor, I do a quarterly call with Amy Hood, who's the CFO. And I think Microsoft's really done a pretty phenomenal job, particularly on the Office side, but also on the Azure side. But is there a lot of room for improvement? Because the market leader on the Azure side is pretty damn big. Yeah, I do think there is. And
what kind of improvement?
You need to have even better attachment and ability to sell to startups and other development companies. The developers. And with Azure, you have to win the developers. And I think Microsoft's getting there, but still has a lot more to do.
Amazon is looking for a new city to start a second headquarters. How big a loss is that for Seattle? Do you blame it on the regulatory environment here?
Well, I don't think it's any loss to Seattle. All those cranes downtown means Amazon is still growing here. Now, they have decided apparently, and I'm not privy to that either, to open a second headquarters. But if you just take a look at how, 2 points I would say, how crowded and you know, sort of full Seattle is right now, the traffic, et cetera, it's reasonable for them to think about a second city. And when I was at Microsoft, we always thought about, should we open a second site? Because it might let us attract different talent. And I don't know what their thought process is, but you know, if that's what makes sense for them, I salute them.
What do you make of the increasing Amazon empire, getting into groceries, you know, voice assistants and all that?
I would say I have a lot of admiration. When I was running Microsoft and we were competing every day, I couldn't per se let myself even think this way. But you just have to marvel and say, whoa, yeah, what they've done is kind of cool. We'll see how it all winds up. We'll see, you know, what it all looks like in 10 years. But I do marvel and in admiration for what they're doing.
You've said you're done being an investor. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I'm not making, quote, new investments, unquote.
So just mutual funds and Microsoft and Twitter, that's it?
Index funds. Keep it simple. Have everything pegged to the market. I have some bonds. I have Microsoft. I have Twitter. And then I have a couple of small private things that I don't do much of, but I have a basketball-based investment. I have one investment with a couple investments with friends. That's it.
What do you think of Bitcoin? Jamie Dimon recently said he thinks it's a fraud. What do you think?
It's not something I've really studied, and I find this whole notion of how the banking system works and wire transfers and currency, I think it's really complicated to understand, and I haven't made myself an expert, so I'll just be silent on the topic and say I have a lot of respect for Jamie Dimon, and we'll see.
And obviously, I know you've been increasingly active in philanthropy. I mean, what is most important to you there? Where will we see? There's this whole trend in impact investing. We want to make a difference, but also get a financial return. What is your strategy?
Well, we're focused on one thing and one thing alone. Every child born in America deserves an opportunity. And there are too many kids born for whom an opportunity to move forward economically is essentially zero, or at least very low from the time of their birth, based upon the economic status of their parents, race, ethnicity, location. That's not okay. Not in this country. It's not okay. And we've got excited about what some not-for-profits can do, but the top, and what government can do. But the thing we've got most excited about is you need to bring communities together with top-level goals to say, this isn't okay. We're going to focus in on what's going on with these kids. And we are involved with a not-for-profit called Strive Together, over 70 communities around the country, where you get the not-for-profits, education, government, all philanthropists, all at the table. And then the community says, what do we need to do to prioritize a good educational and career outcome for our most disadvantaged kids? And I think that is just cool as heck.
There's been an amazing story circulating about you coaching a third grade basketball team.
Yeah.
And the person who wrote the story was on the team and said that you brought the same competitive spirit to the third grade team that you bring to the Clippers. Is that true?
Well, I think I bring good spirit to that third grade team. But believe me, Zach Schwartz, who wrote the article, he remembered nuances of the season that I didn't.
And this was your son's team, right?
That's my son's team, but it doesn't mean I remember all the same detail he does. I've thought, whoa, did I do that? Oh, okay. I guess that was probably okay. No, I loved coaching my sons. I loved coaching my sons in basketball. I'm not really equipped. After about fourth grade, I had to drop out. But that was one of our most fun seasons. I actually have that picture of our team sitting there. Zach Schwartz, he says in the article, he felt bad he didn't have a nickname. Now you can just call him Zach the Monster, lockdown defender. It brought back a lot of good memories for me. And, coaches have a big impact in kids' lives. It's a reminder. Obviously, I had a big impact in Zach's life, but it's a reminder, particularly when you think about kids who grow up in tough situations. Coaches can be some of the important people in terms of helping lift kids up.
I have one last question. There's this big debate about the future of AI and whether it's dangerous or not. Elon Musk thinks robots could take over the world. They could supersede the human race. Mark Zuckerberg has said that's irresponsible to talk like that. What do you think?
Oh, I think that's the usual, what shall I say, effervescence of the tech community. Oh, let's say something extreme. Oh, let's tune it down. Oh. I mean, when you get right down to it, is AI very important? Yes. Will it improve the way people live? Yes. Do we know all of what we will accomplish today? No. But getting computers to be smarter at helping people do what they want to do every day, that part can't get bad. I'm sure there's a place in time where we can speculate about all of the tough societal issues, but we're years away from that. So Elon Musk, of course, what he says in the long run could be right, but the long run could be a long, long run. Not going to happen in the next 10 years or so. And, of course, Zuckerberg's ready to and prepared and, sort of right to talk about that. But right now, you can put some of that clutter out of your mind. This artificial intelligence stuff will make a big difference.
So you think it's possible that the human race could become extinct and
no,
robots
the human
could take
race
over the
isn't going to become extinct. But how powerful will be computers' ability to reason, and what will that fully mean? We don't know. But we're not going to deal with that problem for 20 years.